Hey everybody, I'm great.
So sorry about that.
Recorded. No worries at all. So like I was saying earlier, we usually see this sextortion falling into two groups. So that's the online and offline. If you have any questions about, what I said earlier, if you didn't catch something, feel free to ask at the end. No worries at all. So here is a great little excerpt from an actual survivor of sextortion. It says, "It was someone I didn't know, and he messaged me on a social networking site. He was requesting me to do sexual acts for money, and I declined. He threatened to come to my home, and I said, no, leave me alone. He then sent my address to me as proof he knew where I lived and claimed to have pics of me, which he then sent to me. He threatened to mail them to my family and post them online." So this is just a 15-year-old female victim. And when I read this, I can't even imagine being 15 and this happening to me. I wouldn't have known what to do. So more statistics. So who does sextortion happen to? Um, so 78% of the reports involved female children. And like I said earlier, those are statistics before 2019. So since 2019, like I said, males are being targeted more than females. The age range is typically in between 8 to 17 years old. That doesn't mean that that's set in stone, but that's what research is showing. The average age is similar to the poor survivor in the last slide, which is 15. And like I said earlier, male children are blackmailed more often for money, right? Um, so unfortunately, if we look down here at these infographics, 1 in 4 victims were 13 or younger when they were threatened. So 2 in 3 victims were girls threatened before the age of 16. So these statistics are pretty alarming, which I'm sure you guys can tell. So who are these people that are doing this, right? So typically they're adult predators pretending to be young girls, young boys, or someone of the opposite sex, depending on who they're talking to, right? So these perpetrators, they like to imitate a romantic relationship. So this could be, we kind of all know, I'm sure most of us know what grooming is. So that's kind of what this person's doing. They're trying to gain the trust, maybe a little bit, of the survivor of this or the victim. So typically these people, they know what platforms children are using at the time, right? So whether that be social media, whether it just be an app, whether it be gaming platforms, they study up what children are using, and that's where they go to exploit them. So, I'm sure a lot of you on here have children. Most of you do. I'm sure all of you do. So it's important that maybe we know what our kids are doing online, looking up, having maybe a parental guide or a parental app on your phone that can see what they're doing and who they're talking to. A lot of these are Snapchat, YouTube, Facebook, Roblox, Minecraft, any type of gaming platform, app, or social media that has a chat feature. Your child could be vulnerable there. And typically after social media, they might, they'll switch over to private video chat. So, whether that be FaceTime or, a video chat on like the Kick app or the WhatsApp. Typically they are using messaging apps and not just giving out their phone numbers too. So how does it happen? So child responds to an online request, right? So like that video we saw earlier, that picture showed that there was this teenage boy in the picture. So the girl accepted it and she thought it was somebody her age. So she's like, hey, might as well accept that, right? Then they might start exposing body parts on webcam. So, private areas. They might be sending nude photos to these people for, whatever reason they do, but this is typically how it happens. So after they send these nude photos, the perpetrator will threaten to expose them by publicizing the photos. So they'll threaten and blackmail them into sending more, right? So the perpetrator will say, hey, I'm going to show everybody these pictures and I'm going to expose them to you unless you post for more explicit pictures or unless you send me money. Here's another excerpt from a survivor. He said that if I didn't send nudes to him, he would post pictures he already had online and make sure all my friends and family saw them, then proceeded to take screenshots of people I was friends with on Facebook. So this is interesting. So, and it's good to know. So usually the perpetrators will try to get to know their victims, right? So they'll stalk their pages, see who they're friends with, see who their family's with, and then they'll take those screenshots in order to scare these victims into doing what they want. So how does it happen? So 47% of victims experience these threats daily. So that is such a high statistic. And I'm sure most kids nowadays have experienced this at least once. So first contact, like we see here on this excerpt or this graphic, first contact is typically by phone, via social media, friend requests, like I said. And like I said earlier, they're targeted on platforms that they frequent. So the perpetrators, they know where these kids are going. They know what apps they're using. They know what gaming platforms they're using. Another statistic, so 60% of online victims threatened within 2 weeks of initial contact. We'll talk about 2 specific cases later on, and it was way less than 2 weeks. So where does it happen? We kind of talked about this already. So over 50% of the time, this is happening on social media networks, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. 41% are messaging photo apps. The big one is Snapchat, which I'm sure, some of you have and most of your children have. Over 20% are video call apps. So FaceTime, I'm sure Kik, WhatsApp, those messaging apps might have a feature that does that. And then 45% are involved in more than one platform. There's a whole other bunch of statistics over here. So, 41% messaging photo apps, like we said, 4% gaming platforms, 9% dating apps, 12% and even in email. So everything could be a vulnerability for these kids. Couple more statistics. Some of these victims, they have taken steps to prevent the contact. So 65% of these victims blocked their offenders, which good for them. That's a great thing to do. But unfortunately, 45% reported that those offenders just created another page and added them again and, continued trying to manipulate them. Over here, 62% complied with demands in an effort to make the threat stop. So, we'll talk about 2 cases, specific cases later on, and that's exactly what they did, because when you're a teen, you don't know what to do. Even if you're an adult, sometimes these situations are so tough and so emotionally taxing that you just want it to end. So you'll do anything to make sure that ends, unfortunately. 68% of victims reported that threats became more frequent after they complied. So that's when, the perpetrator might say, hey, if you don't send me more of these pictures, or if you don't send me more money, then I'm going to expose you. another survivor's tale. So I always blocked him in every way, even reported him online, but he would still make fake profiles to make my life a living hell. And this is just a 17-year-old child. So the effects of sextortion, excuse me. So I'm sure most of you can tell that these effects are the emotional toll that this can take on a child is pretty severe sometimes. So hopelessness, right? Fear, anxiety, depression, extreme sadness, extreme anxiety, I'm sure. Um, it's hard not to put yourself in these children's shoes whenever, you're talking about this, especially as a child where, they they're not fully in control over their lives. They don't know how to fully be in control over their lives. So it's even harder for them to figure out what to do or even talk about it, which we'll talk about later. So the victims are staying silent. So unfortunately, 1 in 3 victims had never told anyone because they're ashamed, because they're embarrassed of what's happening. Talk about that a little bit later. And victims are less likely to report outside of their inner circle. Okay. So 54% are disclosing to family and friends. 26% reported to a platform or website like the cyber tip line that I mentioned earlier. And only 17% reported to law enforcement, which is interesting. Which we'll talk about a little bit sooner, maybe why that's so low. Another excerpt. So they actually made me feel like the perpetrator, not the victim. This is an epidemic for young teens. They are victims. Because of police involvement, I developed anxiety, depression, and PTSD. This is not okay. They made me feel uncomfortable and scared. This is just a young 13-year-old baby. So a lot of the times when we're talking about sextortion or, sexting in general, we always like to maybe blame the victim for sending the nude picture in the beginning. Obviously, sure, it's not okay to do that, right? But if we continue threatening kids with felony charges because of maybe a picture that they sent, they're never going to disclose because they're going to feel like they're going to get in trouble. When in this realm, in sextortion, they're never the ones that are in trouble. They are the victim, right? So it's important that we have open communication and dialogue with the kids that we are in contact with, so they feel safe and supported to come out and disclose anything that might be happening. So some of the tactics used to coerce a child, these include reciprocation. So maybe the perpetrator will say, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. And sometimes, most of the time, I'm sure the perpetrators might not even be sending their actual body part. A lot of the times, I'm sure some of you've heard of this, but they pretend to work for modeling agencies to obtain those sexual images of a child. So those, say that child's beautiful and you would be a great model, and try to groom them and manipulate them into sending them pictures. They develop that bond with a child by establishing a friendship or a romantic relationship. So that's also part of that grooming piece that we have mentioned a little bit. So that's maybe they're giving them lots of gifts right now, or maybe they're just telling that child that they are beautiful and wonderful and creating that kind of like imitation romantic relationship with a child in order for that child to maybe trust them. A lot of them use false identities online, and they typically pretend to be younger and or the member of the opposite sex. So they access the child's online account without authorization. So they hack the child's account and maybe steal sexual images or videos in order to send their victim that. And then they threaten to create sexual images or videos of the child using digital editing tools, which is also an illegal thing to do, because that's still considered child sexual abuse material, even if it's digitally edited. So there are three main goals of sextortion, which we have touched on. So the first is acquiring increasingly more explicit content from the child. So maybe it just started out with, lingerie where they're still clothed. Maybe it'll end up where they're fully nude. The second one is to obtain money or property from the child, which we'll talk about. And the third is to meet to actually have physical sexual relations with that child. So the consequences. So unfortunately, like we mentioned earlier, many of the kids, they don't seek help because they're embarrassed, because they're ashamed, because they blame themselves. And this can have a lasting and extremely devastating impact on people. Where some maybe attempt suicide or complete suicide because they do not see a way out. So 1 in 4 victims saw medical or mental health professionals after this has happened to them. Like we said earlier, 1 in 3 aren't telling anybody because of that embarrassment and self-blame they might feel. And victims are uprooted. So this is really sad, but 1 in 8 victims move from their homes for fear of their safety. Because, like we said earlier, these perpetrators are figuring out where these kids are living, and they show these kids in order to create that bond with them. So here's some red flags that maybe we did have a question come in. I know Louise sent me a question about maybe red flags or signs that maybe your child, this is happening to your child. So maybe they're feeling withdrawn, or they're isolating from you guys, their family or their friends. They're having conversations on the phone with someone you don't know. They're more anxious. They are being secretive about a lot of things. Sharp changes in mood or character. So they might seem extremely irritable just out of the blue. They make suicide attempts, or unfortunately, some cases they have completed suicide. They might develop mental health issues, so severe anxiety, depression. They might take part in criminal behavior, so whether that's drug use or anything related to that. They might drop out of school even. So these are a couple red flags that can happen. And this resource at the bottom of this page, if anyone wants to screenshot that, that's fine, or take a picture of it, because they have some other red flags on there. These were the main ones, though. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard about James Woods. He's the 17-year-old young man who unfortunately completed suicide not very long ago. He's the young man who is from Streetsboro, so right in our hometown. And what happened, this is exactly what happened to him. So he sent pictures through Instagram to the perpetrator. And the perpetrator then convinced James to send a sexual video of himself. There were about 200 messages in a 20-hour span, so less than a day. And then the perpetrator began threatening James to post his pics, and threatening, say, hey, if you don't give me this money that I'm asking of you, then I'm going to post your pics to social media. He demanded $300, the perpetrator, and James did end up sending $100, but the threats did continue. And unfortunately, after the threats did continue, James Woods unfortunately didn't see any other way out, and he did end up completing suicide the next day. I'm sure you guys, maybe some of you have even went to the Do It for James Foundation 5K run that was in the beginning of August. We work closely with his parents who have started the foundation in honor of him, but this is a example of sextortion that is very close to home. Another one. So Ryan Last, he was 17. So the perpetrator in this case posed as a girl, posed as the opposite sex, who was around Ryan's age, and so Ryan did end up sending some explicit pictures, and after the perpetrator did. And the perpetrator demanded $5,000 from this young boy, and Ryan talked him down to 150. And Ryan did end up paying this money out of his college savings account. And after that happened, so that was one night, and then his mother, said goodnight to Ryan at 10 o'clock that night. And Ryan did commit suicide at 2 a.m. the next day. So he saw no way out. He was embarrassed, self-blame a lot. And he did leave a note saying that he was too ashamed or embarrassed for himself and his family, unfortunately. So this is very important. So how you can help. So decide how you'll handle disclosures, right? So usually a child will disclose to a trusted adult in their lives. So whether it's a teacher, whether it's, their parent, whether it's, a coach or anything like that. It's important that children have at least one supportive or trusted adult in their lives. That really increases disclosures. So understand your school's policies. So understand Kent School's policies. And if this happens, please utilize the 24/7 Child Abuse Cares line, which is on the screen. So if anybody needs to take a picture of this, feel free to do so. That report should be made within 24 hours. And the person making the report should be the person the child disclosed to. So nobody else should be making it, except the adult that the child disclosed to. You can also report sextortion to missingkids.org at the cyber tip line, like I mentioned earlier. So what you can do is maybe develop a script. So this is just an example of a script that you can do if your child, or maybe if your child's friend or something, discloses to any of you. So you can say, thank you for trusting me. You can tell them that you're not going to judge them, that you're going to get them the help that they need, that you're going to make sure that they're safe. That's really important. And it's important that you remain calm whenever they're telling you something like this, so they don't shut down. But thank them for being brave enough to disclose this, because they're probably feeling maybe a little bit embarrassed, but it's important that you are there and you're making them feel safe. Another big thing is talking with students about online safety. So talking with your kids about online safety. We're going to show one last really quick video in the next slide that you guys can show your kids, or any children that are in your lives, and explain what mandated reporting is. So explain that if you do get a disclosure, you have to you have to tell somebody, right? And tell everybody else about sextortion, and talking to your kids about the importance of being safe online. Here are those resources that I talked about earlier. So this is missing kids. This is ice.gov. Thorn.org is wonderful. We also have our website, which we do have some resources listed here as well. And then, there's the 988 crisis lifeline too, that unfortunately is sometimes needed. Hold on one second. More technical difficulties. Okay, here we go. So we're gonna watch one last video. It's only a minute and a half. So bear with me.
Okay, so you did a thing. You sent a picture of yourself with no clothes on. Something you thought wouldn't be shared. And in a polite society, cats wear clothes, right? Anyway, seemed like a good idea at the time, but now things have gone wrong, terribly wrong. Maybe you shared the picture with someone you loved and trusted, but after a while, things weren't so friendly. Or they said they'd help you become a star, but they just wanted to use you. Or maybe you met someone online and they really seemed to understand you, but then it got weird, and it turned out to be someone totally different. Now the person you shared the pic with is demanding more and threatening to tell. That's sextortion. Yep, that's a thing. The perpetrator relies on you feeling ashamed and keeping quiet. But they are the ones who should be ashamed. What they are doing is wrong, and it's never too late to find your voice to ask for help, or too early to reach out to your friends to tell them you'll be there no matter what. In fact, you can stop sextortion before it starts by talking about it now. With support, you can do anything, and you can focus on the important business of being cats. So tell your closest friends today you've got their back no matter what.
That's just a cute little video that you guys can show the kids in your life, and kind of teach them about what's happening. Almost done. Okay, so does anybody have any questions for me right now?
I just want to take this moment to thank you, Corinn, because what a heavy topic that is. And for us to, all be aware of it and share that information with our kiddos at home. I have 3 kids myself, so somebody was to ask me what the scariest place was for me, and my answer is always the internet. So just some great information to have. I will go ahead and end our recording now, and then we can open the floor to some questions.